You have a little more decorum than I do.
Yeah, well, some of us are professionals, Michael.
Yeah,
Professionals.
sounds exhausting.
Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm Michael.
And welcome back to the pod, because it's been a while since you and I recorded together.
It sure has. Your studio has not changed much. There's still an animal skull on the wall. There's still towels on your lamps to blunt the sounds.
Yep.
Your dog just came in here and farted. So, yeah, it's like coming home.
And all the terrible stuff I said about you in the last episode, I forgive myself.
What? No. I don't forgive you at all. It was kind of funny. It was like, a couple weeks ago, I texted you like, hey, like, what are we doing? And you were like, oh, well, me, Jason, and Kelvin are doing this without you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, well, I hope the three of you have fun without me. So, anyways.
Oh my God, the chaos of trying to wrangle in 4 people in a podcast. I couldn't imagine.
No, at that point, we need to hire a new editor, or AI needs to advance to the point where it can make sense of our inane gibberish.
Yeah, I hard pass on 4 people on this podcast.
Yeah.
Unless I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
And guess what, ladies and gents? We ain't getting paid for
we
this.
ain't making shit. This is purely for the love of the game.
Yeah.
So
And
tell your dad.
as a nice segue into the love of the game, why don't we get into this week's episode, which you apparently hated right before we started
I
talking
didn't
about
hate it. I just, well, it's funny. So Blake and I, we've been threatening for a while that we're going to do our top 100, and I think we're preparing that in the next couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was admitting to Blake that when I was going through the early drafts of my list, I was throwing on Citizen Kane or obscure Canadian movies just to throw them out there, just to sound smarter than I actually am, right? But eventually I had to take them all out just to admit that I'm a shill with terrible taste.
Yeah.
So as a shill with terrible taste, I didn't hate this movie. It wasn't for Michael.
Well, and so we're doing A Night to Remember from 1958. This is the classic Titanic film before the classic Titanic film came out.
Exactly. I saw a Letterboxd review that said this is the homework that James Cameron copied in 1997. I was like, haha.
It kind of is, in a sense.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that maybe more when we get into the deep dive, some of the stuff that James Cameron just lightly pulled out of this movie and plopped into his own film.
It's kind of it's surreal because I kind of feel like I didn't really realize there were so many Titanic movies back in the day. It was kind of a cottage industry, but then James Cameron did it so explosively that you wouldn't make a Titanic movie now. Are you kidding?
Right.
That would be insane. So
the Titanic franchise has a weird history to it. And I'm going to
Okay.
dive slightly into it, but we don't even have enough time to talk about the full scope of the Titanic franchise. And I'm going to call it a
Right.
franchise, and that's almost doing a disservice to the horrifying tragedy that is the Titanic.
imagine the worst day of your life, and 6 years later, some filmmaker's like, I'm going to make a blockbuster out of this. I'm going to put Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and
But
Kate Winslet.
I kind of get it, though, in a sense, in the James Cameron obsession, because no, I'm not going to say that I'm James Cameron level obsessed with the Titanic,
No.
but I
You
was
do like boats,
definitely
though.
yeah, and
I do like boats.
I was definitely the one who was pushing for this one. I am definitely somebody who you know how there's this meme out there that men think about Rome
Yeah.
once a week?
Oh no, men would rather start a podcast about ancient Rome than go to therapy
Yeah.
or something like that.
That's kind of my thing. It's every 6 months I'm I don't know if I've ever looked up this part of why the Titanic's sunk or something like that.
Okay.
I'm just kind of casually fascinated by the Titanic.
Yeah. Well, I admit, I think I saw some kind of video or something recently where they talked about how or even watching this movie where it's and we're kind of jumping. I'm not even going to bother with a plot summary because it's the Titanic. It's sunk. Spoiler alert. But
Well, let's save the spoilers for the second episode,
yeah.
Michael.
Sorry, guys. But I almost felt and I certainly like the James Cameron movie a lot more. I really like the James Cameron version, but
Right.
watching this movie, I was kind of just okay, yeah, I get it. I can see why filmmakers keep taking cracks at this because it is compelling drama, right?
Yes.
The boat's sinking. It's sinking slowly. they're desperately trying to keep order,
There's a
and
class system in
yeah,
this, and there's also like it feels like a point in time when there is still like maybe some chivalry as well. Like
a little bit,
there's like
yeah.
people being like very chivalrous and noble in their positions, and then there's the classical bad guy kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right. And it's also just like this movie is just infuriatingly British. Like I'm just gonna say it. Like, well, yeah. And I guess again, I don't know much about the Titanic, but I guess it was. And I'm not talking about the movie. I'm talking about the actual ship. It was kind of unusual among shipwrecks in that like they did sort of manage to keep order.
Yeah.
They did try to get women and children out of there first.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep, for sure. And I did listen a little bit to our last episode. I didn't have a lot of time this week, so I tried to get a little bit in.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to refresh myself because I think at the end of the day, when you and I talked about Titanic, the James Cameron's Titanic, it was both of us kind of came away from it being like the first half of the film with the love story and like this story of these two people meeting on the ship. I think you even more so than me were like, this is really compelling, and I this is all I need of a Titanic movie. And then you had to deal with the disaster stuff after. Whereas like I was a little bit more balanced about the film. Like the Titanic is one of my favorite films of all time. Talking about top 100.
It's in my top 100 too.
And so this movie, I think to contrast it so kind of people know maybe what you're kind of getting into. Like obviously this movie does have a slight romantic element to it in multiple instances.
A little.
Definitely some inspiration that James Cameron took out of a couple characters from this and kind of plopped it down in his and expanded on it. But this movie is a lot more factual, documentarian style.
I think Wikipedia calls it a docudrama, and that's correct. It almost kind of reminded me of that other British movie you showed me last year. Do you remember Threads?
Yes.
So it's kind of like Threads, for those of you who don't know, is an old-ass British movie about the apocalypse, and there's not really a main character. It's more a docudrama about the consequences of nuclear war.
Right.
There's maybe like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 major characters that you follow around, but there's no like, there's no protagonist in the classical sense.
Right.
And this movie has a similar approach where there's recurring characters and like recurring, like there's faces you'll recognize, but there's no like, there's no Jack and Rose adjacent characters.
No, and I would say, so characters and people you may know, like the focus of this movie, the closest it gets to a protagonist is the ship's second officer, Charles Lightroller.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that's probably his real name, but it's kind of funny.
Lightoller, I think is his name. I might have said it wrong the first time. But anyway, he's kind of the focus. Like, he's actually who we meet first in the film.
Yeah, and I liked his introductory scene where, like, he's on the train with his wife, and he makes kind of a disparaging crack about the Titanic, and this very stuffy British older man kind of gives him a hard time for being, like, dismissing their country's accomplishments, and then he's just kind of like, well, he's like, oh, no, it's the soap, right? He's objecting to, like, the advertisements.
Right.
Or the soap advertisements. And then he kind of just tells this old man, he's like, I'm the ship's second officer. Like,
right.
I'm not objecting to the ship. I'm objecting to, like, the commercialization of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I guess to kind of, like, contrast that to the Titanic, like, this is a character that I barely even remember from Titanic.
Well, and I mean, maybe I have some sort of, like, weird facial blindness kind of thing, but, like, there are a couple of moments later on in the movie where a character's doing something and I'm kind of looking at them and I have that like sinking feeling in my chest where it's like, oh fuck, I know this guy from somewhere. Yeah.
They definitely like cast people who looked similar in each movie, and that's because actually probably some inspiration from this movie that because a lot of these people were still alive at this time that survived, they cast people that looked very similar to those people.
I guess that's also what's kind of remarkable about this movie is that it came out in 1958, which was like, what, 40 years on?
Yeah, just over 40 years.
Yeah, and like I think some survivors actually went and saw the movie.
Yeah.
And they had some very mixed reactions to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think it was relatively well received when it came out, but
I don't know if this is apocryphal, but I read that one of the survivors like had to walk out halfway through the movie because it was too traumatic.
I believe
And her quote was, a night to remember is better forgotten. And I was like, woof.
I mean, we're only, if you think about it in relative terms, we're about 15 years away from, in this timeline, to keep kind of things similar, we're about 15 years away from somebody doing 2001, 9/11, to be the equivalent time period of like when this came out versus when the Titanic sank.
Yeah, which is sobering, right? Yeah.
It's wild.
So, again, imagine some filmmaker trying to make a movie about the worst day of your life.
Yeah. So, getting back to Charles, played by Kenneth More, who was a really famous actor in the 50s. He also did this movie in the 60s called The Longest Day, which is a World War II D-Day epic from 1962 that I thought sounded actually pretty good.
Okay, cool.
And then Captain Edward Smith, played by Lawrence Naismith. They found a guy who looked like shockingly like the captain of the Titanic. And obviously, again, James Cameron ripped somebody who looked very similar to this guy as well for his film. Lawrence Naismith was actually like a really cool actor who had a really cool career. Like he was in the 1967 version of Camelot as Merlin.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
I thought I recognized him from somewhere.
He's in like a Scrooge musical from 1970. He's Mr. Fezziwig. Like he's in a few other things that I was like, oh man, this guy, like, he's kind of a notable actor from this time period who was in a lot of things that you would know, or a lot of things that are like, like pulls from like history, like big historic franchises again.
Yeah, he got around. He was a,
super cool actor. The other actor, I got two other actors to mention before I kind of wrap up this section, because again, you're the general people, all of the real people from the Titanic, like very similar to the Titanic movie from the 90s. It's a very similar like characters because it's all the real people and like their stories. But the actors that I found interesting, the assistant wireless operator Harold Bride. So he's the assistant guy on the Titanic, not the main guy, played by David McCallum. He is the NCIS chief medical examiner Ducky Mallard. He was like one of the main characters of NCIS in the 2000s for 20 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I know who you're talking about.
So he's like somebody that people actually would know from this 1958 movie, which is wild. And he played that character, like I said, for the last 20 years of his life.
Good for him.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta love those like network dramas, by the way. They just go on forever. There's like 50 episodes a year. Like you just never run out of content.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how you just recycle the same stories. With
yeah,
different actors
I guess so,
point.
right? Well, it's like Criminal Minds, right? Where after a while you're just like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just bring in new cast members.
Yeah.
We gotta make some money.
I wonder if the longest TV show I've ever watched was. Maybe it's probably like, honestly, How I Met Your Mother. I don't think I've watched any show long, like for more seasons than that. I think myself personally.
I know that there was I forget what it's called, but I think they've checked that like the longest running concurrent story is some fucking soap opera.
Oh, easily. That definitely.
It started in radio and then it went for like
there's like the Days of Our Lives, like those kind of things. Yeah. But like myself, like the show that I watched for the longest concurrent period must have been How I Met Your Mother. I don't think there's any show, and this is kind of like you and I are at the tail end of like peak syndicated TV or like know weekly TV, right?
It's almost antiquated now, right? Like nowadays, like you got shows like Severance, which dropped to streaming
once every like 5 years.
Yeah, right. So, or I've been talking about like, I was just telling him like, oh, the new season of Rick and Morty is pretty good, and it's like, I'm literally at 11:30 tonight. The episode's going to be available to purchase on YouTube for $2, and I'm going to be like, blip, blip. Like
Nice.
So, what a time to be alive.
Yeah. So to round out the cast of characters here, there's actually a really deep connection to the James Bond film franchise.
I'm listening.
So I'm not going to get into every actor because this is a British movie. A lot of these actors end up actually making appearances in Sean Connery's James Bond. There's actually an appearance from Sean Connery himself in this movie. Blink and you might miss it. I blinked. I did miss it. He plays one of the deckhands. He's in an uncredited role. This is like very, very early in Sean Connery's career.
Wow.
And I couldn't even find a picture online of him in the movie. So maybe believe that on at your own risk, but it was on Wikipedia and IMDb and like a few other spots. I just could not for the life of me find like the still frame of where he actually is in this movie.
Shit, we gotta watch this movie again.
Yeah,
find that.
You're not
motherfucker.
gonna watch this movie
No,
again.
I'm not.
I might watch this movie again, but
Okay.
And the other kind of actor from the James Bond series that I was gonna mention was Honor Blackman, who plays Pussy Galore in Goldfinger.
Right.
So, which is actually like a pretty interesting film that I did when we did our movie draft a few years ago, and I did 3 James Bond movies.
Oh yeah, you did, didn't you?
Yeah. I thought she looked familiar, and then I was like, so she plays Miss Liz Lucas, the wife with the young kids whose husband makes her get on the boats.
Yeah.
And I was like, you look really familiar. It's because it was Pussy Galore.
Oh.
Yeah.
So James Bond and Pussy Galore were on this ship.
Yes, plus a few cues.
Hey, Ian. Hey, if the Ian Flynn estate is listening, how about a James Bond book where he has to assassinate a target on a sinking ship? You can have that one for free, guys. Don't say I never did nothing for you.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, so there's a few cues in this. I think there's maybe one of the like heads of the 007 like group. There's like a villain or two in this movie. It's wild. Like there's actually a really deep James Bond connection to this.
Okay, cool,
So,
man. Good job, everybody.
Yeah. So who is this movie for, and does it hold up to a modern day watch?
You first.
You and I are gonna have debates on this one.
Yeah.
I think that there's maybe a little bit of jankiness in the first act.
I actually think the first act in particular was quite weak.
Yes.
It was actually, so the iceberg hits at around the 30-minute mark.
Yeah.
And it was literally like when the iceberg was striking the ship, I breathed a sigh of relief because I was like, oh, thank God. Like, oh, good. The plots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what? We're going to get more into this in our deep dive, but I think, our listeners kind of know where I'm coming from. Like, what I admire so much about the James Cameron version is that they develop these 2 lead characters, Jack and Rose.
Yeah.
And we invest in their love story so that when the ship starts sinking, it's more impactful.
Yes.
Because we're so attached to these characters.
Yeah.
Because by nature, this movie is more of a docudrama.
Yeah.
And it's more of an ensemble. I'm not attached to these characters as much.
Yeah, you're kind of like bird's eye view. Like it's a very objective, like stand back and like kind of look. And I think part of why this movie is a little janky is it's also kind of trying to do a little bit of like, here's what it felt like to be on the Titanic. Like here's what the time period was like, and like let's get a better understanding of like the class system in this period.
Yeah, and like it does a good job planting like little seeds where like, I think there's an instance where like some guy rips a sheet of paper off his Morse code machine or whatever.
Yep.
And it literally says like, hey, watch out for icebergs, right?
Right.
So there's stuff like that, but like I'm not invested in these characters enough to care.
Yeah.
Then the iceberg hits and I'm like, okay. Right?
Yeah. So that's where it's like, if you are somebody who really got invested in the love story of the Titanic, like you're going to feel that missing in this movie.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I think that's my primary gripe with this movie is that, you do kind of take this very detached, objective look at what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of little moments of human drama sprinkled throughout. But like, I wasn't really emotionally engaged.
Yeah, I kind of understand that. Now, what I'll say is, again, being a little bit more of a
Titanic head?
Yeah. I found that once the ship started to sink, that feeling of like upset and anguish and like general anxiety that you have in the original, or not the original, but like the 1997 version of the Titanic, all of that came flowing back to me. And like, when you have to watch character after character say goodbye to their loved ones and stuff like that, like every single one of those like really affected me. So I think for me, being somebody who appreciates the historical like accuracy of this, them depicting like what happened during the like last final couple of hours of the Titanic, like I got really invested in this all over again.
I certainly was not nearly as invested as you were, but it did, I guess the advantage this movie has over the James Cameron version is that the James Cameron version, I think to its benefit, focuses so much on Jack and Rose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even when the ship is sinking, there's like the machinations with like the evil fiance,
Yep.
and like Jack's tied to a post, and we gotta go get the keys, and whatever, right?
It's much more cinematic.
Right, which I personally found more cinematic, but like,
Yep.
you know, this movie did kind of give me a better sense of empathy for the victims of this disaster, because like, what, it probably took like, what, 6 hours for the ship to sink?
No, it was only 2 hours. Like pretty much the period of time that it sinks is like the period of time that like it's pretty close to accurate.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, wow, why did I think it was like 8 hours?
No.
I don't know. But I mean, it gave me empathy for these characters. Like, what do you do if you realize that like, oh, we're all gonna die in 2 hours?
Right.
Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah,
right?
and I think that this movie does a really good job of like showing maybe how different people approach the end.
Right. Well, one thing I particularly thought was compelling was, you know, there's these people who are still kind of doing their jobs, right?
Right.
For good or for ill. Like, there's a scene where these kids kind of wander into the first class, and one of the kids is smoking a cigarette, and this like pompous looking official is like, I'm gonna tell the captain on you. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like, bro, the world's ending. Like, you know, let him have his cigarette.
Right.
So, you know, and like maybe this is our disenfranchised post-COVID world, but I'm like, yeah, I could see authority figures being useless and obstructive while the world is ending.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like if you're looking for a cinematic adventure, like action, romantic, drama, like you're better off going with the Titanic that everybody knows.
Yeah, you're better off playing the fucking Celine Dion song.
Yeah, this one's more for the Titanic heads, as you called me. The people who are interested.
I've called you worse.
Yeah, I like this is more for those kind of people who are interested in like the actual historic event that occurred and like seeing kind of the portrayal of that. Again, I really like this movie a lot because of that, like because I kind of approached it and I kind of knew that going in that this was supposed to be like more historically accurate, and like I didn't know that it was going to feel so much like a documentary than that it did, but I had an inkling that that's where this was going to take me.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think I was relatively prepared, and I was definitely somebody who was more predisposed to enjoy this one than you. But as like, you know, again, as a movie, if you were to show this someone and be like, oh, like let's watch this like, you know, disaster film from 1958, like I don't think I would pitch somebody this movie as that.
Well, and also like I don't know that modern audiences are typically that interested in disaster movies anymore.
They kind of, I feel like they kind of ebb and flow. Like I feel like a disaster movies, like there was a peak in the 70s disaster movies, and that's actually like this movie is a movie that gets referenced a lot in those disaster movies, like Towering Inferno,
Poseidon Adventure, whatever it's called.
Yep.
Airplane.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and all the movies that preceded Airplane, right?
Right. Airplane kind of ruined the genre for a while.
Yeah. So
Pretty
so
funny.
there was kind of like, you know, there's like the peaks, and then we had a long period of trough, and then it was like the late 2000s, early 2010s, we had like The Day After Tomorrow in 2012 and like all those disaster movies. So it kind of ebbs and flows.
Right. So maybe we're right on schedule for the next round of...
We're probably getting close.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe another 8-year stretch or something like that. But
okay,
they kind of come all at once and then everybody gets bored of them.
Well, you know, Joker Filet Adieu is kind of a disaster movie.
Nice. But anyway, when to watch... I think that for the when to watch, like this is actually more of a state of mind than a time that I would give you. Like, you know, I found this pretty upsetting to watch. Like,
are you ready to be depressed? Then put it on.
Yeah, like I don't know. I couldn't recommend this as like a blockbuster movie or like a Friday night late night movie. Like the closest I could say is that this is a Sunday movie, but like even then, like.
You don't want to be depressed before you have to go to work in the morning.
Yeah. So
I would say Friday night kind of movie.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, usually it's more of a state of mind than I think a time.
You can watch it during the day if you want. I actually watched it this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, because you're right, it's a little bit more cerebral than.
Yeah.
It's not gonna thrill you.
Yeah.
It's
That's
not gonna
exactly
thrill you.
it. So. Where to watch right now? It is streaming on Tubi. Yeah, it was really good on Tubi, actually.
It was actually. The quality is very nice.
Yeah. I thought it was really good. And that's it for our spoiler-free episode. So come back next week when we talk full spoilers of A Night to Remember.
Full spoiler. Spoiler alert. I didn't like it.
No.
So,
Okay. Well, we spoiled your opinion, but
yeah.
we'll see you next time.
Tell your dad.
Tell your dad.